gonna have some fun.
This is gonna be a war like we never seen before.
Can't you see you're outnumbered?
So let the best man win.
One last shot, one last score, one last season. That's how they're teasing the final season for Force, because it is the final ride for Tommy in Chicago. It's the last shot for him and basically everybody else. But this was a new teaser that was released before you play an episode on Stars, and it does give us a tiny bit more to dig into, where we can actually talk about the war aspect for the final season. We've got Shanti warning Tommy that this is going to be a war like they've never seen before. We've also got law enforcement on the hunt, but is that something that's going to scare Tommy? He's someone who's never shied away from a fight from anyone, whether you're talking about enemies in the streets, his own brother Ghost, Benny and the Italians, or even law enforcement. And later on in the video I will be coming to some Power Easter eggs around something Tommy mentioned back in Power, and also a Kanan hallucination. So as usual, stick with this video right through to the very end. We're going to be running through the latest teaser scenes from the angle with the big war in Chicago for all things Power Book 4 Force Season 3. Now this teaser actually starts with Tommy mentioning we're going to have some fun, as he drives away and leaves Diamond on the side of the road. We've also got him and Diamond bumping fists. But this dynamic when it comes to the war, when it comes to Diamond and the CBI, is going to be very interesting in the final season. Recently I was actually rewatching season 1, and the respect that these two grew for each other pretty much straight away was quite telling. Diamond and Tommy come from the same era, they're OGs in the game. They were talking about how both of them grew up moving weed and how it was different. How the likes of Jenard and the new generation are quite impatient, trigger happy, always looking to get into fights, don't appreciate what it took to build a real organization. But blood is thicker than water, and that has been teased by both Gary Lennon and Joseph Sikora before for season 3. Tommy definitely knows the relationship between Diamond and Jenard will be different, and I do think what will have changed their dynamic is the death of their pops. Sometimes death brings you together, as I'm sure many of you probably have experienced in your lives if you've lost loved ones. We're also going to be talking about how that could actually change the dynamic for Miguel and Tommy a bit later on. But with Diamond, we already know it's going to be a tough ride for Tommy once he is kicked out of the CBI. If there are issues between him, Diamond and Jenard, which I think we can all assume there will be, where does that leave them? Are we going to see Diamond versus Tommy? We probably will. We're definitely going to see Tommy versus Jenard. I do think that's a given. With Diamond, I did mention in my previous breakdown that he's an OG and he has probably got a bit more respect and will probably do things very different to Jenard. For example, I really don't see Diamond giving the green light to attack Tommy while he's burying JP. I do think Diamond's a lot more respectful than attacking someone at a funeral at a place of worship. The dynamic and fight with Diamond will be very interesting because you could sense this kind of brewing from season 2. Tommy was making a lot of decisions without Diamond, and that probably will continue in the early parts of season 3. Gary Lennon even mentioned that they're going to be stumbling out the blocks, and the key word here is they're going to be stumbling. The cracks will already begin to appear early on, and they're only going to get bigger. By the midway point, the relationship's probably broken beyond repair, especially if Tommy is kicked out of the CBI.
These are streets, our blocks.
These brothers, they looking out for themselves.
In the previous teaser, we also had Shanti warning him that he does need to watch the brothers, and we know he's going to be doing exactly that. But again, the fight with Diamond, it really is hard to predict, and that's because of the respect that they have for each other, and how Diamond even mentioned in the trailer, Tommy is his partner.
Tommy gonna blow all this shit up.
He's my partner, bro.
He also the reason motherfuckers getting shot.
So it is going to be interesting to see how this does unfold in the early parts of season 3. What changes the dynamic between Tommy and Diamond? Now in terms of the business, in the teaser, Tommy does mention that they'll take what they can and get the rest later, and I do think he's going to have to act very quick. He's going to have a lot of issues in terms of product and also probably not having a connect. That's something we already know because he wants to burn a certain coalition down to the ground. But the business approach is something that I can definitely see that tears a Diamond and Tommy relationship apart. I mentioned before that Tommy was making a lot of moves without Diamond, and I'm pretty certain there's going to be a time where they disagree on a few things. So that's something to definitely watch early on. But let's move on to Shanti sending Tommy yet another warning.
This is gonna be a war like we never seen before.
Now we've got Shanti telling Tommy that this is going to be a war like they've never seen before. But here's the difference between the two. Tommy's seen plenty of wars, and that's the big difference between him and Shanti. He's fought many wars back in Power and also prior to Power. We've had situations such as the Triads, the Trenton beef. There was also the war with Lobos, Milan, Dre, Jason Michich, the Serbians, Vincent Ragni and the Italians. I'm also going to take it all the way back to when Tommy was a kid. Take a listen to this.
I was the only white kid for 20 blocks. Got my ass kicked every day. But I never gave up. I never stopped fighting.
Tommy used to get his ass kicked every single day when he was a kid. And we also know how Ghost came in at one point to help him. But Tommy never gave up. He always stood his ground and came back. And that's a mindset, level of grit and determination that has stuck with him from day one. Getting his ass whooped when he was a kid, along with everything else that he went through, made him the Tommy Egan that we now know in Power Book 4 Force. You name it, Tommy's been through it all, seen it all and fought them all. Shanti may have never seen a war like this before, but Tommy definitely has, even though all wars are kind of different. They have no idea what Tommy's been through, what he's lost, what he's capable of. Underestimate him at your own peril. I still think he's definitely going to face a few L's this season because, as I mentioned in one of my previous breakdowns, he is going to be losing a loved one, at least one as a minimum. He's also going to be kicked out of the CBI. He's going to be turning into a lone wolf. He's going to be on his own. He probably will have to call Tariq for backup at some point. But come the end, there's only going to be one winner in this war. However, something that the older Kanan once said in a narration in Raising Kanan was how there aren't really any winners in a war. It goes back to the point of how Tommy will be taking a couple of L's in Season 3. And with that recent reference to Kanan and what we've also seen and heard in various trailers and teasers, I did think it was worth a mention. I do also wonder if Kanan will actually pop up in a hallucination to maybe even give Tommy some advice when he's actually fighting this war. It's something that I mentioned a few weeks back before the trailer even came out. And if we are, we're closer than we've ever been for Tommy to see Kanan. Maybe it could even be Kanan who tells Tommy when he's really got his back against the wall that there's only one person that he can call. Pick up that phone and call Tariq. Maybe it's Kanan that tells him and guides him to make that last and final chess move. That's just a thought and a bit of a theory / prediction. But moving on to law enforcement, the war isn't just something that Tommy's going to have to fight against Jenard, Diamond, the CBI, Miguel and also Shanti. There's also going to be the ever-present threat of law enforcement. And again, in this teaser they've made a point of how law enforcement are going to be playing a heavy role in Season 3. There's going to be a lot of bodies dropping in the final season, and that noise is definitely going to be attracting a lot of attention from Stacey Marks and Bobby DeFranco. They gave us a scene of Bobby DeFranco lifting the white sheet up again. His facial reaction, in my opinion, does kind of give it away that it may be someone that he knows, but let's wait and see. We've also got the DA bursting into a warehouse. There are going to be various different raids across Season 3, and that's a dimension to this war that is kind of brewing in Chicago. It really is fun to look at the element of the CBI, the Marquez Cartel, Tommy versus Diamond, Tommy versus Shanti, and also Jenard. But we can't forget about law enforcement, because they are constantly dropping these hints in every single teaser that we've seen so far. They've got a huge role to play in this final season. I'll even go as far as to saying, I do think they may even catch a few wins come the end. I don't think they'll get the big fish that they're after in Tommy, but I do think they may even catch a win or two, just like they did at the end of 4 Season 2. So mixed in with this war is law enforcement. But moving on to Miguel and Tommy.
Can't you see you're outnumbered?
So let the best man win.
Now, this is something that we haven't heard Miguel mention before. He's telling Tommy that he's outnumbered, which he most likely will be. He's going to be a lone wolf, so of course he's going to be outnumbered. But again, going back to my reference to power and Tommy's past, will that scare him? Definitely not. And he does tell Miguel, may the best man win. But I'm not just going to mention how Tommy and Miguel will probably end up working together, because I've done that before. We know this relationship is going to take a turn. Over the past day or so, I've actually been thinking about rather the why and how they'll end up working together, even though it's probably a long shot to guess and predict, because we know Power love to throw curveballs. The last season is going to be full of them. It's going to be quite unpredictable in my opinion. But I have been thinking about how and why Tommy and Miguel could end up working together. Number 1, Maria. I mentioned earlier on how the death of a loved one often brings family closer together. How the death of a loved one can often bury any bad blood or beef that you may have with a certain someone. I gave the example of Diamond and Jenard when their pops died. What if something happened to Maria? I'm not saying she has to die, but what if she was fatally shot, fatally wounded between this war between Miguel Garcia, the CBI and the Marquez Cartel? What if Shay sticks by his promise of taking Maria? Because he did make that threat to Miguel back in Season 2. If something happened to Maria, that's something I can see bringing Miguel and Tommy definitely together. If they have a common enemy, that's something I can definitely see them working together on. If Miguel knows that Tommy's leaving Chicago after this war is over, maybe that's something that brings them to working together in the short term. If Miguel's made a coalition with the CBI, we know what Jenard's like. We know he's going to do something to fuck it up. Maybe that's something that could bring them together. A common goal to take out Jenard and the CBI. Maybe the person who kills JP is the same person who's an enemy of Miguel. Maybe that's Jenard. Maybe that's someone else. That's something that can definitely bring them together. So I did think it was kind of just helpful to run through a few different perspectives and scenarios around the how and the why, rather than just mention they are going to flip the chessboard and have them working together. So with that being said, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section on the brand new teaser. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.